Well, good. In this video, I'm going to talk about writing a successful analysis, and that is assessment objective 4 and 5 of paper 1 IGCSE and Excel English Language A. Therefore, we're going to start with an analysis. We're going to start with what is an analysis, a definition of what an analysis is. An analysis is when you explain how the writer has used a device to create an effect. You have to explain what effect the author is trying to create. You must consider the effect for the audience and what the author is trying to suggest about society at that given time. Students, an analysis is an explanation of the writer's use of different devices and their effects that they have to the readers, and we're going to talk about that one briefly. Therefore, how do you quote? Because quoting makes part of your analysis. This is how you quote. But before you quote, what is a quote? A quote is a piece of writing extracted from the text. You must use quote marks. An open quotation mark is placed prior to your quote, while a closing quotation mark is used after the quote. And that is, some books, they call them opening and closing speech marks, which means that the words that you're going to use as the evidence have to be quoted from the text that you've just read. What is PEE? Because equally when you're analyzing, you need this particular aspect right here. You need to point out, draw evidence, and also explain. Therefore, point, evidence, explanation can equally be used to analyze. It is useful as a way of constructing the paragraph. Point, this is the idea that you're trying to suggest. It is your own idea. Remember, it has to be original. It is your own idea. What you think, a general approach to the text. It usually answers the question. Evidence, this is the quote that you are using to support your point. And this has to be from the text that you're reading or that you've read. You should aim to integrate the quote with the point. To integrate here means that you need to patch it in between. You need to fix it in between so that it can make a complete aspect of point, evidence, and then explanation. So it is sandwiched. It comes in between the point and the explanation. And therefore, final explanation right there. These are the reasons why you think the quote suggests the point. And a big word there, the key word that I need you to look here is that suggesting. Because you're giving an indication that it's a suggestion, somebody else could have a different opinion. Therefore, it has to be a suggestion. You should aim for at least 3 comments. Here's an example. Within the poem Still Arise, Angelo implies that freedom is a human right that is natural, and therefore that is a point. And how does Angelo bring out this clear? Through an evidence from the text, like moons and like suns. Angelo is discussing the natural order of the world. It seems as though she is suggesting that it is instinct to desire freedom, and it's human nature to recover from feeling low and suppressed. Therefore, that fits an explanation. What is a Peter paragraph? Because you equally need to know what is a Peter paragraph. A Peter paragraph can equally be used when analyzing. It's the same as point, evidence, and explanation, similar to the same, but it is much more specialized to language and structural devices. Point, it is the idea that you're trying to suggest. Of course, this has to be your own idea. It usually answers the question. Evidence, this is the quote or a citation that you are using to support your point. You should aim to integrate the quote within the point or with the point. Technique, a technique, this could be the language or the structural technique used by these writers. It should be named. For example, a metaphor, a simile, use of ellipses, use of use of imagery language, so forth, so on. And explanation. These are the reasons why you think the quote suggests the point. You should aim for at least 3 comments. And then finally, the reader. This is the effect that is being created or impacted on the reader. And therefore, it makes Peter paragraph, P-E-T-E-R. P for Peter, E for evidence, T for technique, E for explanation, and R finally for the impact that the use of those techniques and the explanations have on the reader. Point to note. Peter paragraph do not or does not need to occur in a set order. It can take any order. Example, Maya Angelou demonstrates her feelings of freedom. That's the point. Within the metaphor, technique. Metaphor is a technique. I'm a black ocean, and I'm quoting that technique right there. I am a black ocean, leaping and wide, which of course makes the evidence. She is suggesting that she is so full of life that her positive spirit is never ending. She cannot be contained in a similar way to the ocean being free. An explanation right there. This creates a sense of empowerment for the reader and a feeling of hope for the reader again. Now, another aspect coming up for you to come up with a comprehensive effective analysis is comparing. How do you compare? The best method of comparing is to place 2 Peter paragraphs together with a comparison stroke or contrasting connective. Remember, 2 Peter paragraphs. Comparison is when you draw parallels between one text and another. These might be similarities and they might be differences. It is up to you to determine which you are drawing. Connectives are required for comparison and contrasting. Here are examples. Comparing connectives into brackets, similarities. I'll read them. Similar to, similarly, both, as well as, in the same way, and finally, also. While contrasting connectives, those are the differences, we have whereas, unlike, differently, different to, on the other hand, and finally, in comparison. These are introductory phrases that can be used when you're comparing similarities, and when contrasting differences. Take them seriously, and I would suggest that you pause when you're making your short notes, or go review again the video for the second time and make sure that you've internalized this one for the sake of exams. So here is an example of comparing text. Chopping, I've used 2 text anthologies from our coursework, our course book, and one of them is a fiction text and the other one is a poem by Maya Angelou. So Chopin presents Lois' freedom, which is point, through using the trees almost as a metaphor. And I quote, tops of trees that were all a-quiver with the new spring life. And of course, it's a technique and evidence, of course, we've just mentioned right there. The trees almost seem to reflect her inner self. She feels that she is now in the spring of life and it is time for her to grow and blossom. Of course, that makes an explanation. As a reader, I feel inspired by her newly found confidence, and that is the effect that it has to the reader. On the other hand, Maya Angelou also demonstrates her feelings. Look at the way I've used the particular connective similarity link also. Maya Angelou also demonstrates her feeling of freedom, which makes the point. Within the metaphor, which is a technique rather, and I quote that technique, I am a black ocean, leaping and wide. That is the evidence. She is suggesting that she is so full of life that her positive spirit is never ending. She cannot be contained, in a similar way to the ocean being free. An explanation. This creates a sense of empowerment for the reader and a feeling of hope. Of course, that is what effect it has to the reader.